Greetings, senators of the Galactic High Republic. I hope you are enjoying that democracy and not letting capitalism take over and leading us towards the Clone Wars. But anyway, you are listening to Horror Nerds at Church, a ridiculously queer podcast where we take a deep dive into a horror film or a book and talk about how it connects to queerness, religion, and theology. My name is Pace Warfield, and I am in love with the Millennium Falcon. All three personalities of her that are simultaneously united.
I love it. And I'm Pastor Emily, and I am a non-Wookiee sentient being who does not speak with human vocal cords and therefore does not matter at all.
Right.
I have opinions.
We see you, Star Wars. We know how you roll.
Mm-hmm. Follow us, for those of you who are just listening to this. Follow us on Patreon at patreon.com/horrornerdsatchurch for the video of today's episode. And for those of you who already are, hello. How you doing?
Hello.
It starts at only $5 to sign up, and you get exclusive access to hours of bonus content, including BooTube episodes about TV shows, movie commentaries, bonus episodes, and more. Plus, right now, the funny faces we're making, and you get to meet Dave the Beholder, who has a long, complicated story, but mostly means he's our unofficial inanimate mascot.
Yeah. Dave the Beholder has been explained on, I think, every single one of our book episodes so far. So go back and listen to one of those.
Dave the Beholder's solid artistry from
Agreed.
Friend of the podcast, Stephanie Kaler.
So for our book mini season, which is really just kind of a preamble to season 6, but is also its own thing because books are awesome. But anyway, you don't need to have read the book to follow along at all. We're not going to reveal major spoilers without warning, and we're only going to really talk about stories that are mentioned in the show notes. So so there's a whole lot more stories in there. So definitely go pick up this book. Books. Yeah. But listen for some flavor, some of the lore, what kind of treasures await you if you pick up this book from your local bookshop or library, or borrow it from a friend, any of those things. As always, check the description of the episode for any content warnings. I changed that because it's easier than trying to remember to record them.
Good to know.
So that's a change.
I had not heard you say that before.
Yeah, so that's a change beginning season 6. You're hearing it here first. But anyway, this is the lovely book we're going to be covering. So you can see.
Look, we both have copies. Mine is paperback.
Mine is hardcover.
And if you are listening to it on audiobook is a fantastic way to engage with these books because they put significant effort into sound effects and different voices and all of that stuff. So
yeah, I'm a Star Wars nerd, y'all. I'm sorry. So I enjoyed. First, let me say I got these from Libby, which, if you don't know about Libby, it is the most amazing app you can ever have.
Fantastic.
It connects to your library. You put in your library card, then you can access audiobooks and ebooks from your library for free.
Yeah, it's fantastic. They don't even have to pay us, and we will consider them sponsoring this.
Yeah.
Because that's how I listened to the first one on audiobook.
I think we're kind of skipping announcement. We'll get back to announcements in a second, but this is just such a perfect segue, and it's so rare we can do a good transition that I'm going to roll with it.
We have to explicitly name it, which kind of makes it less good. I love it.
Yes, exactly.
That's what I do on Nerds at Church all the time.
So anyway, yeah, this I first got this book and read it through Libby, through the library, and read it audiobook style, which has just such amazing, as Emily was saying, production and sound design. Lucasfilm being owned by Disney, but even before they're owned by Disney, just super have a lot of resources that I can put to some really quality audio books and audio plays and audio dramas. So check them out. I always recommend any Star Wars book if it's available on with an official audiobook. Check out the audiobook. Um, but because I'm a nerd, I felt that I also needed to have any book that like I really really love. I'm a book collector, so I mean I have 1,500 books, and that's not exaggeration. Like I literally have 1,500 books. So it's like any book I really really love, even if I've already read it, even if I've listened to an audiobook, even if I own a digital copy of it or something, I just feel the need to own a physical copy too. So that is why I have it physically in addition to having first listened to an audiobook.
I have it
And
physically because I got it as a gift from the podcast. Also,
yay.
because my audiobook did not become available in Libby yet. I put it
Boo.
in months ago. And then
Rude.
it's like, which is, it is what it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
These are one of the few audiobooks that I would actually want to own. Like I don't own audiobooks very much because I like to read. Also, I have a fly, sorry. Um it only comes out when I'm recording podcast episodes. Um but they're like Billy Porter's Unprotected. I want to own on audiobook, and
mhm.
the Star Wars from a Certain Point of View books I would like to own on audiobook. That's all. Like I don't need other ones.
Nice.
Those
I
ones are like
Amazon is an evil company. We all know this. However, a lot of us still use Amazon because there is no ethical consumption under capitalism. And for a variety of reasons, some of us might need to use it. So we're not going to shame anyone for using Amazon or anything like that. But for a very long time, I had an Audible subscription, and Audible is owned by Amazon. So I have a great many audiobooks in my library.
mm,
But that I love. I just love audiobook. It's such a all ways of reading are valid, whether you prefer to read audio, whether you prefer to read through braille, text to speech, through reading paperback or hardback books, if you prefer to read graphic novels or picture books. I don't give a fuck. But
mm,
I particularly love reading audiobooks when it is a memoir, and especially when the author is narrating their own memoir.
yeah.
So that is like what the vast majority of my audiobooks I own are memoirs from people that I um, enjoyed their book and listening to them talk about their life. So um, I think that covers the first time we've read this book. So we can now backtrack, rewind to announcements. And I don't have any except that this should hopefully be coming out before our Christmas episode.
I was gonna
So,
say that might be the only one I'd pull up. Yeah, it's holiday time.
yeah,
Woo, woo. If you want to see what Pace and I have been watching, you can check out our Letterboxd. I need to catch up because the truth is, my holiday watch list is now at 30?
30
No,
movies you
31.
have
31. Plus, there's a show that I'm like still watching.
31 that you plan to watch or that
No,
you
that
have
I've
watched.
read. I've watched.
Nice, nice.
Yeah. I. Oh no, that's my roll for. Hang on, sorry. When is it? Oh, even better. 35 that I
Wow.
watched.
I
Forgot to
have
add one. I
oh
rolled a nat one yesterday, so I watched The Night Before Christmas. Knight.
oh night that night. Yes.
Yeah,
The cute little Netflix
that one was
romance.
my
I think
yeah,
it's
that was
adorable.
mine, that one. Last year I was just not in the space for it, so I thought it was terrible, so I put it as 1, and then it was cute this year. So I think it's not an every year kind of one.
I love that you do roll for holiday movies.
It
Um
helps when I'm like, I don't know what I want to watch, but I want to watch something.
that's a good idea. I
Mhm.
have not updated my letterboxed in 2 days, and in the past 2 days I know you and I have watched at least 2 movies, so I need to update those.
It's true.
Um
I also need to update mine.
because we watched I repeated watching It's a Wonderful Knife, which I
Mhm.
love and
Which is
watched earlier this year.
fantastic. I love that one. I gave it, spoilers, 5 snowflakes. You can interpret all of my like stars as snowflakes
I
for
love
the
it.
holiday ones on Letterboxd.
And this, by the way, is the what's the word I'm looking for? The 2023 It's a Wonderful Knife. There is another movie called It's a Wonderful Knife that came out in the early 2000s. Never seen it. Don't even know what it's about. Um and then I also watched with Emily, excuse me, as I cough into the mic, Violent Night with which came out last year, and that is such a great, fun, Christmassy action slash borderline horror movie. I just love it. It's so fun.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a good one. It was like Die Hard meets Home Alone.
Yeah. Uh, I also watched. Since I have my letterbox up, I can actually like go through some of
Yeah,
the
I
stuff I
have to
watched.
I haven't put any of the things that I've watched, but
But let's see. I watched lately.
the first one that I watched when it was officially like the time that other people have deemed as appropriate time to watch movies was Elliot the Littlest Reindeer, which got 5 snowflakes.
Never seen it.
It's adorable. It's adorable and
Okay.
super queer in like not a sexual orientation kind of way.
Good to know. The first thing I
It's
watched
also
when
animated though.
what day is it appropriate to start? The day at Thanksgiving, the day after
I
Thanksgiving,
think
something like that.
technically the rule is the day after Thanksgiving for too many people.
Yeah, for people who don't like to have fun in their lives.
Exactly.
Um
Exactly.
so the first movie I watched the day after Thanksgiving to rein in the holiday spirit was Star Wars: Return of the Jedi.
Hmm.
And then I watched Doctor Who, the 3 specials, which by
Ooh,
the
I still
way,
have to watch the third one.
oh, it's so good. I
The
wish I
first one was phenomenal.
all 3 of them honestly are some of the best Who we've had in a long time, which
Yeah.
isn't to say that Jodie Whittaker's run wasn't great, because there she also had some really good Who. So it's just that, like, I wouldn't say like the past 5 years of Doctor Who have been some of the best we've
They've
had in
been
a long
getting
time. I'll put
they've
it that
been
way.
actually like shifting to fantastic as
Yeah.
opposed to certain people who thought that like the companion should win by remembering real hard. Moffat.
Steven, yeah. We'll do another Doctor Who boot tube at some point so you can hear our unadulterated opinions on Stephen Moffat. You already heard my opinions on Russell T Davies' first run. If you go back and listen to our most recent Doctor Who boot tube, where I was talking about how much I hate Russell T Davies' writing, but we've had 3 specials
And
that
now
he
you're like,
wrote,
this
and
is
I really like
fantastic.
them. So who knows? Who knows?
That's true. It's true.
Um.
So many possibilities.
Anyway, what else have I been
I will
doing?
say my first actual holiday movie that I watched before Thanksgiving was Holiday in the Wild. And out of 5 snowflakes, I rated it elephants. Cuz elephants.
I will say, Holiday in the Wild is one of the worst holiday movies I've seen
Have
that has been made in recent years, and yet somehow, cough cough, due to Emily being in my life, I have watched it pretty much every single year with Emily. So since we started like the marauding band of queers. I've watched it like 3 years in a row, and I hate it. But so thank God though
There's
that this year
elephants. I
Emily
watched
has
it
already
without you.
watched it. Yes.
But there's elephants, which is really the only reason why I watch it. And I would like to point out that it is not as bad as the movie that we are not naming that we saw together the other day, last night. I don't know, whenever. And it's also not nearly as bad as Christmas at the Ranch, which would be 1 star, except for there are gay characters who are the main romantic comedy selection.
I have
But
not
other
heard
than
of
that,
this.
it is awful. It is. Oh, it is. It is. It is. Yeah. It's gay. That's why it got 2 snowflakes instead of 1.
Yay, gay. Make the Yuletide gay.
Yeah. I don't really rate things 0 snowflakes, so 1 is the lowest it goes, but
Okay. Well, the movie that we're not naming that everyone knows what we're talking about anyway, because it's Star Wars and it's holidays and it's coming out on Christmas, so y'all
hey,
know. But anyway,
mystery. It could be the Ewoks #2 movie because we watched the first one last year.
yeah, and those have already been announced that they're going to be on Patreon. So,
Shh.
um, but anyway, that movie is rated 1.5 stars on my letterbox, so you can go and find
Ooh.
it.
So far, it is 1 snowflake for me, but I haven't put it on Letterboxd yet.
It is the lowest rated Star Wars
As
movie
it should be.
according to my letterbox rankings.
Yeah, I have to watch it again because I may have fallen asleep during it.
That's okay. It's hard not to fall asleep.
Especially last night.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Anyway.
anyway, I guess we can get into. Oh yeah, Star Wars season is coming in January. In
Mm-hmm.
theory, and I only say in theory because Emily and I haven't. It's now like fast approaching Christmas, and I have yet to like start planning and actually booking guests for Star Wars season, which is like supposedly starting less than a month away.
The
So
same can be said for Nerds at Church.
I love it.
Is that
So
because I'm supposed to be sending the emails?
so it might be starting the very end of January, but there will be a episode on A New Hope at some point in January, in theory. So stay tuned, and we'll also start dropping the Patreon stuff in January because that's mostly already recorded. We just have
Yeah,
some of the boo tubes to finish up, but
we got to record stuff early because we're awesome.
and the
Woo!
WGA and SAG After Strike helped give us space to do it. So
Yeah.
thank you, striking workers, for making your voice heard and working for justice, and
Mhm.
a personal thank you for
For
also giving
making
Emily
my
and I a break.
break. I mean, we needed it. You
Yeah.
know, it's hard to keep up with stuff when you're anemic, which I am no longer.
Or when you have a really awful
Shut up.
situation in
Yeah.
your personal life, which I'm
I
not
mean,
getting into because I know a few people
yeah.
who listen to this who might know what I'm talking about if I were to talk about it more. But
Yeah.
anyway,
And make sure you edit out that part where I said what it was.
yeah.
Oops.
Anyway, so The
Yeah.
Empire Strikes Back from a certain point of view.
May
It,
21st, 1980.
yep.
The world was forever Jane. Okay, I'm not actually going to idolize because I don't think that it should be idolized like that, but it could have been fun.
It
A
kind of
long time
was.
ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Yep. So this is a short fiction anthology. It came out in 2020 to commemorate the 40th anniversary of The Empire Strikes Back, and it has 40 short stories by 40 plus different authors, because some stories are written by more than one author, and each one tells a story of a character from the film Empire Strikes Back that is not one of the main characters. So basically, Luke, Leia, Han, Chewie, Lando are all off the table. Darth Vader's off the table, but pretty much anyone else can be fair game to be written about in this anthology. So it's really fun.
Yeah. And we both picked the same first two, but I named it first, so I get to pick them.
Yep.
So Pace, tell me what your backups.
Well, before I do that, first, just
Oh,
we already covered From a Certain Point of View, the first book. It was just
yeah.
called From a Certain Point of View, which commemorated the 40 years of A New Hope. So you can go back and listen to that episode and also hear the backstory of that, because that I'm not going to recover the backstory about what these are for this. So you can hear how From a Certain Point of View came to be.
Yeah.
Um,
Ooh. But I will tell you a secret thing. So, one of the things that I thought was really, really interesting, that maybe is me like reading into technicalities, but I think actually is me like seeing this, is me seeing the sneakiness of um the company. In the About the Authors, it says all participating authors have generously foregone any compensation for their stories. Instead, their proceeds were donated to First Book, a leading nonprofit that provides new books, learning materials, and other essentials to educators and organizations serving children in need. To further celebrate the launch of this book and both companies' long-standing relationships with First Book, Penguin Random House has donated $100,000, and Disney Lucasfilms has donated 100,000 children's books valued at $1 million to support First Book in their mission of providing equal access to quality education. So they're still making money off of this and not sending any of their proceeds. It's just the authors who are not making any money off of this, which seems kind of shitty to me, but
yeah. If you go back and listen to the first one, so I don't know if this changed. You might be reading too much into it, or you might actually be really onto something, which could be the fact. Because I know for the first one, um, all of their proceeds, if I'm remembering correctly, were donated to First Book, the companies, and they specifically named that. So the fact that they're not naming it for this one seems that maybe they aren't. I don't know.
yeah.
Good call. Good catch with that. So
I try.
anyway, to
Lest we think that big multinational billion-dollar companies are ethical or something.
like, who would have ever thought Disney was an unethical company? I mean, literally anyone who has read any news story about Disney in the past 50 years would probably know, but
It's true. It's true.
okay, so this is behind the scenes. How we do this is we each pick two stories we like, and then we do one additional story, which is the will story about the wills, because there's one of those in each book, and it's kind of a neat way to tie the little trilogy together.
Or two bonus stories.
Yeah, or maybe there might be two bonus stories. So as Emily alluded to, when I read this, I had two stories I wanted to make sure we covered that were going to be my picks. Those stories were picked by Emily, so you have to hear what those stories are. So that made me go back and re-look at the stories, and I'm kind of glad I did, though, because I really like the two I picked.
Yeah.
So the first one I picked, and I'll tell a little bit more about why I picked it when we go through the story. But the first one I picked is Hunger by Mark Oshira, which is told from the Wampa's perspective. And the second one I picked was There Is Always Another by Mackenzi Lee, told from Obi-Wan's perspective. And then in the order of the book, there's a bonus one in between those two called The Dragonsnake Saves R2 by Katie Cook, told from the Dragonsnake's perspective. And if you haven't seen the book, it's a one-page little
Comic.
like 4 or 5 panel comic.
I
It's
wonder how
adorable.
that would come out on an audiobook.
It was not in the audiobook, so I did not even know that story existed until I went back and I audiobooks. So if you were to buy the audiobook, most of the time
I
audiobooks
would have
will
the
come
PDF.
with a PDF of the stuff that is not included. But since I got it through the library, I didn't even know about it until um, I got the hardback cover.
Nice, nice. And then I picked, before Pace told me what they picked, I picked Faith in an Old Friend by Brittany N. Williams, which is told from the perspective of the Millennium Falcon and the three droids that together make one Falcon. And then I also picked Right Hand Man by Lydia Kang, which is told from 21B's perspective, and 21B the is the medic droid who is working on Luke's hand after it gets severed
Mm-hmm.
and giving
Mm-hmm.
him a new fancy mechanical cyborg hand.
Yep, yep. And then we'll end with The Wills Strike Back by Tom Engelberger, told from the Wills perspective. And if you don't know what the Wills are, we'll explain it at the end. But they're kind of they are a narration device devised by George Lucas, which have now become canon. So it's kind of a cool thing.
Mm.
But anyway, we'll start with Hunger. So the author Mark Oshira, they them, is the award-winning author of the young adult books Anger is a Gift, a 2019 Schneider Family Book Award, Each of Us a Desert, and Into the Light, as well as their middle grade books The Insiders, You Only Live Once, David Bravo, and Star Wars Hunters, Battle for the Arena. They are also the co-author with Rick Riordan of the #1 New York Times bestseller and #1 indie bestseller, The Sun and the Star, a Nico D'Angelo adventure. When not writing, they are trying to pet every dog in the world, something I
Aw,
try to do as well. Uh,
that's cute.
and be after my own heart. Um, so, do you have a one sentence summary for this one, Emily?
I do indeed. My one sentence summary is military conflict and colonization displace the local population.
Nice. I have ecosystems are fragile. One Wampa tries to protect his.
And mine is longer, but I think only because my words are bigger.
Still counts as
So
longer.
you decide if you take a drink or not.
Yeah.
I'm not,
Um
because I would have had to put my boot on to go downstairs.
yeah.
That was going to be a lot of work.
Well, I picked this one because it's a really good story. It's written by a non-binary person, so obviously props for that. Just non-binary rep. But
Mm.
but beyond that, it's just like it's such an interesting story. My favorite thing about all three of the books in this series are when an author picks a character that you don't even think of typically as a character. They're like either an antagonist or a wild beast or something like that, kind of like the Wampa. It's just this wild indigenous predator animal on the planet. But then to get the interior life of the Wampa and just find out what all is going on there, so fascinating. So that's why I picked it.
I think that is a great reason to pick it. And when we were talking about having both wanted to pick the same first two books, I then started suggesting like other options. And one of them was either this one or the one um, of the, is it Bantu?
Yeah, the
That they
Bantus.
write? The Bantu who ended up dying on the trip when Luke was lost in the snow in Hoth. Um,
Uh,
but there were like a bunch that were. I might have the wrong animal.
yeah, I think now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think it's a Bantu. I think it's I don't remember what they're called, but yeah, we know the weird lizard-like creatures.
Now I have to figure it out. She will keep them warm. Okay. Tauntaun.
Tauntaun, there we go.
Yeah. So I had suggested either one of the this story about the Wampas or like the story about the Tauntauns, because I think it's a really, there are a couple stories of non-human
Mm.
characters that didn't, yeah, that like you just think of as complete back, not even background characters, but like just background,
Mm-hmm.
um
Mm-hmm.
and then to like go inside their own internal life and find they're actually more advanced because they can smell emotions and they can detect what's going on with people way better than humans can.
Yep.
um so yeah, so I was excited when you picked this one.
Yay. So, I guess we could get into the theology of this one. Just like a real quick like plot summary that if you didn't get it from the our one sentence summaries is the Wampa, the rebels come in and make a base in the Wampa's family home, and so the Wampa has to travel, and find a new home, and is displaced from its habitat, but also loses its wives and cubs as and is kind of left on a note of will the Wampa find them again? Who knows? Are they dead? Who knows? But anyway, so a lot of the story is just this kind of interior monologue of what the Wampa is thinking as it encounters the rebels, as it encounters the Empire, as it encounters Luke. And the whole thing made me really think of Robert Allen Warrior's Canaanites, Cowboys, and Indians. If
Mm.
you've never read that article, it is a fantastic, fantastic piece of liberation theology from indigenous Native American perspective, which looks at the story of Exodus, which is so central to Gustavo Gutierrez's theology of liberation. And
And
most of liberation theology is based on this story of Exodus of
I was gonna say Black
God.
liberation theology and Black church
Yeah,
really
is
also.
God rescuing people out of slavery and bringing them into freedom, and God caring for and having a preferential treatment for the poor, the marginalized, and stuff like that. And so Robert Allen Warrior takes that and says, but the Exodus story is also a story of colonization because you have these Israelites coming into a land that is already occupied, and God helping them take over this land and destroy the peoples there and take over the land. And so it's just this fantastic article. And so what made me think about that and all of this is we think of the rebels as the good guys, and yet here we have the story of the rebels causing very real harm to this ecosystem, to this Wampa, um, and just like destroying a habitat, even though it's for the sake of the empire. Like there's still real life loss and grief and and injustice that's happening from the rebels doing this.
Yeah, and I think it's particularly poignant right now because we get that, and we also get it even from a rebel perspective in a sense with Hank Green's story, which is that of a naturalist on Hoth. And um but I think it's part of why I think it is so particularly relevant as we are in Advent in month 3 of very active genocide against the Palestinian people. You like I as a Lutheran, as a Christian cannot talk about Christmas without recognizing that the place where Jesus was born is under occupation and attempted genocide. Recognizing that Bethlehem is not in Gaza Strip, but that the Palestinian people in Gaza Strip and in the West Bank, and everywhere, are like there is a plan for eradication that has been stated explicitly by
Mm-hmm.
Israel. And like we can say that it's complicated and it is, but also genocide is not complicated. There is right and wrong when it comes to genocide, and genocide is
Yeah.
wrong. Um
Yes.
and so
Yes.
and so that's and that like my force lore piece for this was like the question of how the Star Wars universe navigates sentience versus non-sentience versus force, because it feels like right? People coming in who have a good reputation. The rebels have a good reputation in terms of us as the people watching, but they're displacing the Wampas
Mm-hmm.
and potentially the Tauntauns, right? Like they've captured and enslaved the Tauntauns. And so there's this like really poignant analogy here, and also the only way that we're making the analogy in the Star Wars universe is when they are considered to be non-human animals without sentience, um, which is part of genocide, is dehumanizing people, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
like there's just like so much for me that ties into this of like I feel very differently about the country of Israel and its leadership than I did when I was a little kid, because I've learned more and I know more of the nuance, and that nuance helps me know how pointed the leadership of Israel is being and how
Yeah.
pointed the leadership of Hamas is being, and how different it is for the real lived experience of Palestinians and Israelis. And yet, we're still
Yeah.
stuck in this place where one group is being actively genocide, is having genocide actively committed against them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um,
Soapbox for this one.
yeah. It's all good though. It's important stuff to talk about, especially as you said in the season of Advent and nearing Christmas. And I will say about the Star Wars universe is that beyond the original trilogy of trilogies, the expanded books, TV shows, especially TV shows like Andor and stuff, have really also problematized the rebels. So it's happening without it just being in this like non-human space, but it's so clear when we get the story told from what we would probably consider an animal, um, who is still sentient and still deserves deserves life and an
Mm-hmm.
abundant life and family and all of those things. So
Kind of like the orcas.
yep, yep.
I know, I'm just throwing all the things in.
uh well, the next story then I guess we can get to is the Dragonsnake Saves R2 by Katie Cook, told from the Dragonsnake's perspective. And like I said, this is a short little comic book, but or comic panel, few panels. But Katie Cook is the creator of the Nothing Special webcomic on Webtoon and the oldie but goodie webcomic Gronk, A Monster Story, which was one of the first webcomics archived by the Library of Congress. Cool
Hmm,
fact.
nice.
Um, she spent several years as one of the primary writers on IDW's My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic comics, to the point that they made her a pony on the show. Really happened. She is like literally one of the coolest people. Then there's
That's
all
awesome.
right. And there's all the books that she has illustrated and written for a tiny franchise called Star Wars. So maybe it'll take off one day. Who knows? This is from her website. So she's the one with all these funny jokes, not Pace. Time will tell. But anyway, she has also written and drawn comics for Marvel, Disney, Boom, and many other publishers. So,
Nice.
um,
I do you want to go first for your one sentence summary of this one?
sure. A romance story told in 4 panels.
Even the dragon snake knows that R2D2 is the best.
I love it.
Again, mine is longer. I feel like you're just intentionally trying to do them as short
I'm
as
not.
possible.
I promise. I try to make them funny, and that's all I tried to do. Um,
Okay.
so why did I pick this one? And I did pick this one after Emily stole my two. Uh, because I was looking through, I'm like, what other ones could I do? And I was like, I should do the R2 one, but I'm like, this can't count. I'm like, it can count. So I just added it in there. And
It's
Emily,
literally our podcast.
right? And Emily is such an R2 fan that they're just like, sure, let's do it.
Absolutely.
So,
Because R2D2 is the best.
yeah, I don't really have any theological discussion for this or anything. I just wanted to name it because it's a really fucking cute story. So I just wanted to mention it and talk about how much I love it. That's really the only point of it being here.
It is adorable. My only point was the I think it's worth at least pointing out that rather than destroying R2D2 out of frustration that R2D2 wasn't edible, which is perhaps what most humans would do, the dragon snake just spits R2 back out and like back out onto the land. So it was a like, if only humans were anywhere close to that kind, we might be
Hmm.
a little better off on this planet.
For sure, for sure.
Also, I think R2D2 is fascinating and
Right.
prompts us to ask, does R2 have the force? And I think something just recently came out that R2 is a droid with, I forget, it's like some fancy like Star Wars term, but like a sentient droid.
Hmm.
So,
There is, so I'm naming it now so Emily can't steal it. In from a certain point of view, Return of the Jedi, one of the stories I'm going to pick is one that features R2 prominently. But it's not told from R2's perspective, it's told from a different droid's perspective who encounters R2. And it is the droid in Jabba's palace who tortures other droids. So it's
ooh.
such a fascinating story. I don't want to give any spoilers or anything from it, except for a very, very minor spoiler, which is the droid who is torturing other droids and stuff is on a quest for freedom. And
Mm.
the droid who is doing all that, upon meeting R2, learns that the human practice of mind wiping droids is what prevents droids from having sentience and having freedom. And so the fact that R2's memory banks have never been wiped lead to R2's sentience and memory and freedom and personality. And so that's just a little behind the scenes trivia of what you'll get in our next episode when we cover, well, not our next episode, but when we eventually get to Return of the Jedi.
Spoilers. I mean, I'm going to start reading it tonight, so we'll
And
see.
it's pretty early on, so a very minor spoiler, but it's such a good story.
That's fascinating. R2 gets that like cuz the first the first book, the red droid also has a conversation with R2. So,
R4D4, yeah.
yeah, fascinating.
Um,
Yeah, R2 is just amazing.
yep.
Also, I find
Well,
it fascinating that we did it in. I mean, I guess it's because I like, picked two of the last stories, but
yeah.
like in order.
So our next story then is There's Always Another by Mackenzi Lee, told from Obi-Wan's perspective. And Mackenzi Lee holds a Bachelor of Arts in History and Masters of Fine Arts in Creative Writing from Simmons College. Her novel, The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue, was a New York Times bestseller, an ABBA bestseller, and has been optioned for film by Greg Berlanti for HBO. I have
Ooh.
not heard anything about that movie yet, so I don't know if it's already come out or if it's going to come out, but I'm excited for catching it at some point. Mackenzie Lee was a 2018 Stonewall. Uh, Let me scratch that, reverse that. The book, A Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue, was a 2018 Stonewall Honor Book and won the New England Book Award. In the style of a classic adventure novel, it tells the story of a bisexual British lord undertaking his grand tour in the 1700s with humor, mystery, and magic, while also exploring the queer experience in the 18th century Europe. It was named one of the best books of 2017 by outlets from NPR to Vulture and praised by Teen Vogue as the queer teen historical you didn't know was missing from your life. Its sequel, The Lady's Guide to Petticoats and Piracy, was an instant New York Times bestseller, and the series wrapped up in 2021 with The Nobleman's Guide to Scandal and Shipwrecks. This series has been translated into over 20 languages. So I'm really excited to catch these books. They sound so fun.
Yeah. I think that the book might have, or the movie option might have gotten, uh, I think it was impacted by the pandemic.
Oh.
because it was supposed to come out, or they were talking about it in 2019.
Ah, so yeah. So
So,
maybe it's not going to be a movie. But anyway, those books exist, so
or
I'm so
maybe it
excited to
will
watch them. Yeah.
in the future. We'll see.
Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah, they
But
sound cool.
but so your turn for the one sentence summary for this one to go first.
Obi-Wan one-ups Qui-Gon.
Then mine is even in death, poor Obi-Wan can't catch the break. Which means Emily's is shorter.
Woo woo! No drinks for you. Yeah. I just had to reference because Pace has now done this twice as picked the like well, I guess we had Claudia Gray on for a special
Mm-hmm.
episode to cover the Qui-Gon version of this. Or this is the Obi-Wan version of the Qui-Gon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So why did I pick this? Is it any surprise? Okay. I have mentioned many times my love for Obi-Wan. He is as problematic come. He's a cop. We all get it. He's awful. And yet he's also just like one of the most fascinating figures in Star Wars to me, and has ever since being a kid, even before the prequels, Obi-Wan has always been one of my favorite characters. So of course I'm going to pick a story with Obi-Wan in it, and of course I'm going to pick it when it has a lot of mystical theological shit like this one does. And the Qui-Gon one did too, and we had a great time talking with, as you said, with Claudia Gray about the mystical Force Lord Jedi stuff. So definitely check out that episode if you like this story. Even though she didn't write it, it's still kind of a lot of the same themes and stuff.
Yeah.
So and I also picked it because it has the best opening of any of the stories in this book, which is Obi-Wan saying, I had hoped that dying would be enough to untangle me from the Skywalker family's issues.
I mean, really, Obi-Wan should have known better.
Right. I like how one single family fucks up the galaxy for like
A
15
long
generations.
time.
It's so
Yep.
bad.
Yep.
Um but there's just so much richness in here. Like the whole kind of like the Qui-Gon story from Claudia Gray last book. Mackenzie's Lee's story here is just so chock full of deep theology stuff that we could spend hours talking about. But one of the things that really struck me is Obi-Wan spends a lot of time talking about how death is good for forgiveness and for thinking. It kind of gives you a different perspective so you can engage with what has happened in your life and a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
guilt you carry. And you can see it in a new way and wrestle with it differently and have new perspective, and can help you learn to forgive yourself if you are holding the guilt of your boyfriend turning into Darth Vader and taking over the galaxy.
I do think that the like that space of death and becoming one with the Force um is a really I mean again, like part of this is just like it's hard to think about without the lens of like Advent and Christmas and like queer
Mm-hmm,
family
mm-hmm.
grief, like queer people grief, which like if you need some tips on how to handle the holidays, check out our episode from last year,
2 years ago.
2 years ago now, but still very relevant. That is a survival guide to the holidays for particularly a queer
Yeah.
survival guide, with friend of the podcast, Susanna Porter.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, but I do think like right now we just we feel grief more acutely when there are holidays and traditions that we are accustomed to doing with that person. And by grief I don't just mean death, right? But like there's a particular way that it comes out in death, and like in our house that's happening with like having to clear out a house and get the stuff out of the house before it is auctioned off. Um,
Yeah.
and it's just like, yeah.
I legit wrote a blog post that came out about a week ago when we're recording this about accompanying people who are experiencing grief in the holidays. So I'll link that in the show notes as well. But it is really such a thing. I wrote that for Spirit and Truth Publishing. The other thing I really like about this is the acknowledgement that Obi-Wan has of how much has changed, and a
Mm.
part of that, like forgiving himself, I think the story does a really good job of him kind of realizing that he was put into an unfair situation when he was not even a Jedi Knight himself. He was still a Padawan when he was forced to suddenly become knighted in the field and suddenly take on a Padawan himself. And this Padawan is the chosen one, this prodigy who is like so brilliant and stuff, and somehow Obi-Wan is supposed to guide him. And then there's like lines in there like about how Obi-Wan would wake up in the middle of the night panicking, thinking that he's doing a horrible job, and like, oh my gosh, Anakin doesn't even know how to swim. How do I teach someone how to swim? And stuff like that. And just these really like cool moments that the force serenity, oneness with the force, union with the divine, whatever, is giving him perspective and some healing on.
Yeah.
And that's kind of clear from the first movie, A New Hope, just like how much guilt Alec Guinness does such a great job of playing Obi-Wan, of just like how much guilt this man is, and trauma and PTSD this man is carrying. And so I think this story does a really good job of addressing that.
Yeah. And I think that's true, and I think that's one of the reasons why you and so many of us are drawn to Obi-Wan as a character. Like, he's never been my favorite, but that's cuz I'm apparently a fan of robots. Um which I think is an autism thing. Um but the that space where like he's not perfect, but we also see him trying and trying to grow. And
Yeah.
so, even in the imperfection, even in the places where he causes lots of harm, we also see him growing and trying to wrestle. And, like, in the Clone Wars thing, right? Like, one of the loves of his life ends up being killed, and like the
Mm-hmm.
way that he has to navigate guilt and complicity with that, but then
Yeah.
also like the way he has to navigate his own feelings when the Jedi Order says no, you don't get to do that. So I
Yeah.
really like that aspect of Obi-Wan.
For sure. For sure. And a little bit more context for the story, if you haven't read it yet, is that this story takes place in that scene when Luke's about to leave to go to Cloud City to rescue Leia and Han. And Yoda is saying, don't do it, don't do it. And then Obi-Wan appears and is also saying, don't do it, don't do it. And then they eventually goes. And so a lot of what Obi-Wan is recognizing and dealing with and grappling with is Luke is really acting like Anakin right now. Is this going to be another issue? Are we going to lose Luke to the dark side like we lost Anakin or something like that? And one of the lines he says there that goes to your point about just always trying is Obi-Wan has a moment of like recognizing, no, Luke is a different person than Anakin, and I'm a different person than I was back then. Yoda's a different person. We are all better than we had been back then. There has been growth, and we have learned from our mistakes, so we can kind of prevent this from happening again. I also like there's a line, another kind of funny line in there about how the we don't see this on screens. This is another cool thing we get when we have this fun stories that kind of give us more insight into what's happening. Is we only see Luke training with Yoda, like some few snapshots of that in the movie, but apparently Obi-Wan has been making plenty of appearances during this training session for group therapy sessions between you, Yoda and Luke, which I just love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
um And then the last thing that I want to say before we get into the Force lore, I know you have something too, is just how much Obi-Wan is in love with Anakin and still is in love with Anakin now. It's very obvious, and I love that Mackenzi Lee is a queer author and is picking up on this kind of queer love triangle that was going on in the original trilogy between Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Padme. But just how much loss and grief and how much that resonates with me as somebody who is now divorced, and I still very much love my ex, and but it's like that person is lost to me. And so it's just a lot of connecting with Obi-Wan and his feelings for Anakin still, even though recognizing that Anakin is beyond him and lost to him at this moment.
Yeah, I think that's a great place for folks who have complicated grief because they're grieving something or someone that was not just holistically good. And like, which is reality, like everybody, right? But like if you have uh an abusive situation with a parent or something like that, and then that parent dies, and like whether or not there was ever going to be um whether or not there was ever going to be like resolution,
Mm,
there definitely isn't now. And like, how do you navigate that, and how do you do what you need to do for you
yeah,
to let go or to process that grief and all of the complicated feelings in it? um and I think like we don't get an answer in this, but we get some hints at like some of the complexities of it, which I think is
mm,
really helpful. um,
yeah,
I was looking at it, and in the realm of like Obi-Wan wondering, is Luke gonna be Anakin again? Is Luke gonna be another Anakin? Um, and like the urging from both Yoda and Obi-Wan for Luke to stay and finish his training. And it reminded me of the parable that Jesus tells of Lazarus and the rich man, I think in the Gospel of Luke, where the rich man at some point wants to like go back and warn his siblings and wants to send Lazarus to warn his siblings and stuff. And it's just this like the oddness and the futility of returning. Like
yeah,
Obi-Wan supposedly is showing up to urge Luke to stay, but like, nope, he wasn't listening to Yoda when he was there about staying. He's not going to listen to Obi-Wan, even from the great beyond the Force.
yeah, yeah. Um, a little bit of Force lore here, which all kind of connects to the Jedi Order. If you haven't caught on yet, you will definitely catch on when we start covering the movies. That I think Emily and I are both like not about the Jedi Order and see them as galactic cops and not good
Yeah.
people. Not until like they're the High Republic Jedi are a different thing. The Reformed Jedi when Rey takes over a different thing, but definitely the Jedi Order as we see it in the prequel series are just like cops, and then in the Clone Wars become militarized cops, and so it just is so gross. And so you see Obi-Wan starting to acknowledge some of this, and from the oneness with the Force, seeing that the Jedi were not great. So he talks about how he was a good Jedi, and I can't help but hear good cop.
Mm.
And then in the same sentence, he's talking about how he was basically indoctrinated from childhood. And so, of
I
course,
mean,
he's going to think the Jedi Order is the bee's knees if you're stolen from your parents at the age of like 6 months or a year and then raised by the Jedi to think they're the best.
yeah. I mean, it is child soldiers,
Yeah,
especially when we're thinking about the Clone Wars and thinking about Ahsoka and all of those. Like, they're child soldiers, and we have this like understanding that that's bad, but it is so far removed from dominant US culture that we don't see the pain and the harm of it in
mm,
fiction.
yeah,
And I think about this particularly in the Ember in the Ashes series by Saba Tahir. Part of what she talks about of why she did it the way she did it, because there are child soldiers in that too, but it gives this very different depiction of what it means that like
yeah,
acknowledges how harmful it is and how dangerous it is for kids and how it impacts kids and stuff. And so I think that that's just like, it's interesting to see the different ways that people approach the same topic, whether they have in recent history or cultural history an experience of what it is like to have child soldiers,
Yeah.
and that kind of violence and oppression, or whether it's no, we don't do that,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
even though we still do. Like,
Yep. Another series I've recommended before about this topic too is the Animorph series by K.A. Applegate with child soldiers. And she got a lot of criticism when she finished the book series because the book series didn't, they all grow up, but their lives as they all grow up and no longer are child soldiers are in shambles. And they're like, why didn't you give them a happy ending? And she's like, these are children soldiers. Why do you think they're going to have a happy ending? So she's like, I stand by my unhappy ending for the series. So the last thing, two things I want to are still both related to like the Obi-Wan realizing the Jedi aren't great. Is when he's talking about how hard it must have been for Anakin when two Jedi show up and they're not there to free the slaves or not there to help the marginalized. They're just there on a pit stop. And he and Obi-Wan quips, the legendary justice of the Jedi is for others, not for those in need. And just how powerful a line and realization that is. And then also Obi-Wan is constantly struggling with how to talk to Luke in this story, what kind of things to say to Luke, what kind of things to reassure Luke. And one of the things that Obi-Wan realizes is that the language that he has been taught in the language of the Jedi ultimately isn't enough to address these circumstances. And so it's just this failure of this religious order that's supposed to help just is absolutely not helping him in this moment, and how he has to look beyond it.
yeah.
So
Speaking of faith and religion, um, our next our next story. That was terrible. Um, our next story is Faith in an Old Friend by Brittany N. Williams, which is told from the Millennium Falcon's perspective, as we mentioned. Um, and Brittany N. Williams is a SAG-AFTRA and AEA actress, writer, singer, director, and the author of That Self-Same Medal, which came out this year and is the first in a series. She holds a BFA in musical theater from Howard University and an MA in classical acting from the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, which is the one that Carrie Fisher attended as well. Brittany has performed across 3 continents, including a year spent as principal vocalist at Hong Kong Disneyland, and her writing has been featured on blacknerdproblems.com, tor.com, and The Independent, The Gambit, and Fireside, in The Independent, The Gambit, and Fireside Magazine. And together with Daniel Jose Older, who is another author whose story we didn't pick, in the Star Wars universe, she co-hosts the Ink Bottle podcast. So, I think it's your turn this time, Pace, right? To go first.
Yeah, I think so. Mine is God, I fucking love the Falcon.
And mine is When a Ship is the Trinity, which is shorter than yours again.
Yay, take your shot. Because
No,
Emily
don't
got
take a
shorter.
shot.
Oh, I thought it was take a shot when yours is shorter.
No, we take a shot. I thought it was when it's the more common. We take a
Sure.
shot.
Take a shot no matter which way. Just take a shot. Have fun. If you want to take a shot, take a shot. If you don't, don't.
Yeah, technically it's the same number of words. Your words are just bigger this time.
No.
So I picked this one, and I picked it partly as we have established. I love droids, and I resonate with them a lot. But also, um, the Millennium Falcon is fantastic, and it just has like such good imagery for the Trinity. for being the Trinity. And we got in Solo, the movie, which will come out at the very, very end of this season
Mm-hmm.
on our um on our Patreon feeds. We got a really like cool insight into L3, who is one of the droid heads
Mm-hmm.
as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to person heads, um of this Trinity that is the Falcon. And so it was just cool to have L3 be the back in the story.
I love it. I love it. Um, I don't think I can overemphasize how much I fucking love the Falcon. So Emily got to pick the story, fine, whatever. But I'm
But
not
Pace put
salty
in the
about it
notes
at all.
first, and so the notes are like all blue because Pace put in all the best notes.
I'm not salty about this at all. But anyway, so like the first time I saw Star Wars, I was in second grade. I have like this distinct memory. You'll hear more of this when I get to our thing, but this is relevant to this story in particular. Um, but from the second I first saw Star Wars, I thought the Millennium Falcon was the coolest spaceship of all time. And to this day, I still think it is one of the coolest spaceships to ever appear in any sort of media ever. Love it. Um, and but I have this distinct memory in third, fourth grade, somewhere around there, when the what is the name of that? There's a video game, that's what it's called, Star Wars Dark Forces, video game
Mm.
that came out in 1990 something, 1995. So I was 10 years old, fourth grade-ish, maybe third, fourth grade, somewhere in there. Anyway, in that ship, Kyle Katarn has this ship called the Moldy Crow, and everybody was talking about how the Moldy Crow is the fastest ship in the Star Wars universe, and it's the coolest ship in the Star Wars universe. And I remember having like the biggest fight with my friend group about, y'all are fucking wrong. The Millennium Falcon is so much cooler than the Moldy Crow. I don't care that the Moldy Crow is supposedly faster than this cool thing in this video game. Y'all are wrong. It's the Millennium Falcon. So anyway, like that's my love of the
Millennium
Millennium
Falcon
Falcon.
can do things in 12 parsecs.
True, exactly.
And
Which is
finally figured out how to make that a thing.
yep, yep,
Which, like, kudos to Solo, the movie.
yeah. I mean, I still don't buy it. Like that's a creative way to try to retcon that, but still, it's just like
Hmm.
no, that just doesn't make sense. But anyway,
I mean, I could like see it, but yeah,
you'll get there when our star solo.
yeah.
Uh, well, I guess we could start. So basically what we learn from the story is that ED4, L337, who is a character we have seen before, but the only character we've seen
L3.
before, and V5T are all droid brains that have been uploaded to the Millennium Falcon. So what we learn is that V5T is the original, basically, computer brain of the Falcon that came with the Falcon when the Falcon was hot off the Corellian factories, and it all comes with a computer. So
Mhm.
V5T is the computer brain of that. But then some owner before Lando had uploaded ED4, which is a slicer, which is the Star Wars universe language for a droid that is able to um basically like a does like internet pirating, hacking, those kind of things. So a slicer droid was added to the Millennium Falcon, which probably is one of the reasons why Lando enjoyed it and was such a good smuggling ship, and then continued to be a smuggling ship for Han. But then, as we see in Solo, and as Emily said, L337, which is clearly a sentient droid, full on AI, not just consciousness AI, was uploaded, and the three kind of meld together to create this triad, and it's described as a whole which can be made of 3 separate parts without weakening.
Mm-hmm.
So as
Trinity.
yeah, so the Millennium Falcon is basically the Trinity. There's also the Mortis Trinity that we cover in our stuff. So there's a few Trinities in the Star Wars
There's a
universe.
lot of Trinities.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
Um.
Yeah. But
So.
I do love, part of what I love is that they have like, there are so many people who get so mad about like shifting our language so it's not so patriarchal, of like Father, Son, and Holy Spirit to
Mhm.
Creator, Redeemer, Sanctifier, or Parent, Child, Spirit. And they get so mad because they call it a heresy. And I love this, that like in here it really does give a sense of like, yeah, they do have different functions and they're all there while they
Mhm.
are having those different functions. I just think it's like a great example.
Yeah. So basically, what you're hearing is that if when Emily gets a call again that teaches confirmation, their confirmand students will be required to read this when they start learning about the Trinity.
You know,
So that
that's
way
not
they
the
can
worst
understand.
thing in the world.
Right? It's
Also, I
actually a
don't
good
know that I'm
idea.
ever going to have a call that has confirmation kids again, but we'll
My
see.
new job will, so maybe I'll start
Ooh.
assigning this story for confirmation class.
Mm.
Great. What the kids want is more homework. Even if it's Star Wars, it's still ultimately homework. Um
Then maybe you just have to spend a class period reading it to them.
yeah, because that's also fun too. Uh, for
I mean, this would
for
be.
the average middle schooler. Um not the weird middle schoolers like
I
you
was
and
gonna
I
say I
were.
can't. I did all the things in my confirmation class. So
Right. So what else do I have? Oh, C3PO is very pissy and old fashioned. He is very upset by the Trinitarian setup of the Millennium Falcon and is very finds them to be very obnoxious and things. So
hmm
C3PO, get your shit together.
yeah, stop
Um,
being such a prick.
yeah, I also love that.
C-3PO is the like white gay male of the droids.
Right. I also love that the Falcon simultaneously expresses love for Flyboy Han, Chewie, Lando, and R2. So like they can love multiple things. Check out
hmm
our relationship, anarchy, and polyamory episode to learn more about that. If you're like, what? You can love multiple
hmm
things? Yes, you can.
Love looks different for different people and can be expressed in many, many ways.
Hmm.
Like with Rolos that I'm hiding from the rest of my family. All shall be revealed in time.
Oh, interesting. Um, Also, when Lando first gets back into the ship, just a beautiful moment of reunion between Lando and L337 in particular.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I also love that the ship comments to itself that language is very complicated, and it's true. Language is very complicated.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel you on that.
I
And
do
then,
think
okay.
uh, I just want to add to that moment of Lando in the ship. Like I remember, it brought to mind the visual of the movie, right when Lando comes back into the ship, and in the movie, it was just like boys and their vehicles
Mm-hmm.
stuff, right? But then to like know more about L3 and then to have this perspective is just like takes it to a whole deeper level, which I really liked.
Yeah, agreed. Um, I so there's a droid in the story that is finally given its due named Treadwell. So if you have seen Empire Strikes Back, and I presume all of you have at this point if you're listening to this episode on Star Wars, um, when Han is on Hoth, there is a droid. Han is on Hoth in the hangar. Chewie and Han are working on the Falcon trying to get to work as the stuff is evacuating. We see this droid just kind of off to the side on top of the Falcon, also working on it. We don't know anything about that droid. But this story gives it a name. Its name is Treadwell, and we learned that a little bit of its backstory about how Han picked up Treadwell and stuff like that. And then we also learned that Treadwell is the one who is able to alert Cloud City that the Cloud City computer that the Millennium Falcon was tampered with by the Empire, but dies in the process. So that's why we never see Treadwell again in Return of the Jedi or ever again. So this one little split second cameo on screen becomes this whole arc of a story we learn. Love that about these books.
Yeah.
But when Treadwell dies, there's this line in there that the Millennium Collective wrapped around itself and mourned. And I just love that image as a Trinitarian image of God mourning, of just wrapping it around itself and mourning as this
Mm-hmm.
beautiful thing.
Yeah. We talk about like the dance of the Trinity a lot. And I think about the dance of the Trinity as more spread out. And then the like wrapping around. There's, I don't know where it is, but there's an image of the Trinity that's pretty abstract. I think maybe I posted it in one of my blogs, but it's pretty abstract. And the arms are like really spread out and the people are spread out, but it's like just a curve kind of
Mm.
thing with like a circle for the head kind of shape for each of the people of the Trinity. And so I think about that and then this like sliding into kind of like puzzle pieces where the arms slide around each other into this like group hug thing.
Aw,
And it's really beautiful in my head.
I love it.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I have for this story is that this story. So, my favorite line in the entire Star Wars franchise, all what 12 film, what I don't know what we're up to now, 11 films, something we're in there, millions of hours of TV shows and stuff. My favorite line has always been and continues to be when C3PO is being put together by R2 and R2 goes off to go fix the Millennium Falcon so they can escape Cloud City. And R2's like plugged into the Falcon and C3PO comes and he's holding his leg still, and he's standing there and he looks at R2 and he says, "I'm standing here in pieces and you're having delusions of grandeur." Favorite line in all Star Wars. And I love that that line is repeated here in this story.
Yeah.
And shows like the Millennium Falcon's perspective of what's going on when that line is said.
Yeah. I love that too. Um I I am realizing as we're like going through these stories that so much of these stories that we picked is grief. There
Mm,
is grief everywhere, which like makes sense
yeah.
for the Empire Strikes Back. Like you don't actually look at it and think, well, the good guys are gonna do well.
Yeah.
Um, but the like this one, right? Not just for Treadwell, but also when L3 is uploaded, but then also when Lando comes back and there's not the same space. And the interaction is different, and that's a lot of what grief is figuring out new ways to be in relationship with someone who has died, um, where they can't necessarily talk back. And I just think it's a great example both of grief and of adaptation, that it
Mhm.
adjusts and adapts with changing circumstances. So it's not a static thing. And so much of how I think of electronics and computers and stuff is it's a static thing unless you do a thing to update it. And
Mm,
this is a very different kind of, because I think partly because there are three of them, they help each other
yeah.
adapt and grow and learn new language and stuff.
Hmm. Having been in a triad for about 3 years, I resonated with the story in those ways as well. Something very polyamorous and
Oh yeah,
queer about this
which
story
like
and setup.
also fits with the Trinity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For sure.
And I still want to know if droids can have the Force. So,
I say, why not?
I mean,
I mean, if the
that's right.
Force is made of all living things, and if we're learning that droids have consciousnesses and personalities, then that means they're alive. So then the Force is made of all living things, including droids.
Right.
That's my line, anyway.
I agree. We should put it on T-shirts or something. HNAs, Like the extra extra. HNAC claims
All
droids can have the Force.
all droids go to heaven. That's what I'll put on the
Oh
shirt.
my gosh! Can we do that as a shirt?
Yes. Yes. We'll have
Because that would be like if you did like we could draw R2D2. We could draw.
Yes. I think
I
this is going
have
to be
an
a shirt.
idea. I have an
Okay.
idea. Text me about it so I don't
Okay.
lose it. And while you do that, our next story. Our next story is Right Hand Man by Lydia Kang, told from 21B's perspective. And Lydia Kang is an author of young adult fiction, and nonfiction, and poetry. She graduated from Columbia University and New York University School of Medicine, completing her residency and chief residency at Bellevue Hospital in New York City. She is a practicing physician and associate professor of internal medicine who has gained a reputation for helping fellow writers achieve medical accuracy in fiction, for which all of us who have particular areas of professional expertise or specialization give you thanks on behalf of all of us who don't have people check that. Her poetry and nonfiction have been published in JAMA, JAM, JAMA, the Annals of Internal Medicine, Canadian Medical Association Journal, Journal of General Internal Medicine, and Great Weather for Media. She believes in
I love
science
it.
and knocking on wood and currently lives in Omaha with her husband and 3 children. Um, she's really cool. She's an
Right?
actual doctor.
I love it.
Yeah, and I was looking at her website and she um was writing about pandemics
Oh
when the
no.
pandemic hit.
Wow.
So that was fascinating. But yeah, so I love this. I love this one. My one sentence summary is define man.
Oh my goodness. Mine is 2-1B tells Luke to get over himself and his ableism. So take your shot or not take your shot. I don't remember which one we landed on. But mine is longer once again.
Mm-hmm. I'm so proud of myself. Um,
Yeah, you got what, 2, 3 that were
mm-hmm,
shorter this time? I'm
mm-hmm.
impressed. And that
So
also goes to show you I don't purposefully make them shorter. See?
it's true. It's true. So why pick this one? I picked it because I love the way that 21B wrestles with the physical reality and the awareness of the deeper force or emotional reality. Um, Plus, I just love the droids.
I
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And I would have picked this had I been able to, because not just what you said, which I agree with 100%. I love that, but I also love the arc that we see Luke go through here, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of puts word. One of the great things about film is that it is a primarily visual medium, and so there's some stuff that are told visually in the ending scene of Empire Strikes Back. But here to have expanded in words and see some of those emotions that Luke is going through and wrestling with is kind of cool as well.
Yeah. And I think, yeah. So, like, in that vein, I think it's really important that we think and talk about the characters in Star Wars as disabled. Um,
Yeah.
because so much of our lives in the world um, downplays disability, dismisses disability, makes it invisible. Both of us have glasses, right? Which is not, in a meaningful sense, a disability for us because it has been accommodated everywhere, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that the fact that glasses are not the most accessible thing, but are readily accessible for us means that we have accommodations for our disabilities.
Yeah.
Um, but there are also other things that are like disabling. I currently have a boot that I'm walking around on because I did something to my foot. I don't even know what I did, but I can't walk on it without the boot. Um, and that like is a temporary disability, hopefully. But then when we get into like media and stories and all of that stuff, we don't actually name disabilities as disabilities, which further isolates and invisibilizes disabilities. And so to be able to like name Luke is disabled and
Yeah.
has an assistive device
Mm-hmm.
that helps him function
Yeah.
and isn't really accommodated as much in culture because they just fix him instead of fixing the world around him,
Yeah.
which is like a whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Stairs are everywhere.
And yeah.
Yeah.
And as we learn from the expanded media of Star Wars, not just the films and stuff, having robotic devices is as a mobility device or as a tool, like having artificial limbs and stuff like that in the Star Wars universe, is actually something that changes how a Force user is able to function. And so we learned that in the novelization of Revenge of the Sith with Anakin's hand, how he um, lost his hand just like Luke does, and has to relearn how to wield a lightsaber, and finds that he no longer can sense things through that hand the way he could before previously with a physical hand. And so it really does change and alter the disability, um, the disability matters and changes, and we don't get that in the film. So I think it's important to name that it matters and it changes how they interact with the world when it happens in the books, like it happens here. And that's even something that 2-1B talks a little bit to Luke about, is how some things are different. Most of the things will be the same. You'll feel the same. It reacts to pain and stuff, but it's still an artificial limb.
Yeah. And I think it's also like, especially when compared to Kanan Jarrus, right, where he is blinded and then his force powers grow and
Yeah.
for all intents and purposes is fine now.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I like when there are situations where no, it actually matters. Um, because it does matter. And they
Uh,
should all be like, we should work really hard to adapt for people's disabilities and to make public spaces and private spaces accessible to people
right.
of a variety of abilities and
Agreed.
disabilities. But
Um, the only other thing I'll say from this before against Enforcer is you must not close yourself off to help. I love that line. 2-1B says it to Luke, and it's a good advice for all of us. So if you're listening to this right now,
mm-hmm.
here's a reminder: you must not close yourself off to help. It's okay to ask for help.
It's okay to need help. It's courageous to ask for it.
Yes.
Yeah. I buy like in addition to your stuff notes were around grief and adaptation. Again, it's grief. And it's okay to grieve this, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm certainly not going to tell someone how they have to emote, what feelings are allowed and not allowed when it comes to their own body.
Yeah.
It's okay to grieve this. And
Yeah.
I think part of the grief of becoming disabled, for those of us who have not always been disabled, is a recognition that we might not have otherwise had, that Luke probably didn't have, of how much harder life is with a disability or how different it is with a disability, especially when it is not accommodated
Yeah.
in culture, in
And
society.
also the running theme, not just Luke's grief about, and this is one of the things that 2-1B really is struggling with, and is the Luke is clearly grieving something,
Mm-hmm.
and 2-1B is like, why are you having all these deep feelings? You just lost a hand. It's not that big of a deal. We can fix it. And
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of it is his grief over his loss of his hand and his losing of ability and stuff like that. But
It's
this is
also
also right after he learned that Darth Vader is his father, and so he is having a lot of feelings about that. And that is one of the things that 2 and B slowly starts to doesn't know like what's going on, but starts to realize, oh, there's something here that is
mhm.
a mental ailment or depression or grief or sadness that I don't understand and do not know how to fix. And so that's kind of what you talked about, why you love this story, is kind of the droid trying to figure out, well, what do I do with this? I don't know how to do
Yeah.
this.
And that the droid can sense all of these things that point it towards grief, right? That can
Mm-hmm.
sense the change in heart rate, can sense the change in temperature, the like change in facial expression, all of that. So that it finally gets to the point of like, there is this thing, it is grief. How fix? And then it's like, you can't. You can't actually fix everything.
Yep.
Like the droid in particular wants, but just in general, like you can't just fix stuff. Grief doesn't ever get fixed. You
Right.
learn to live with it and you process it, and you're, it as cliche and nerdy as it, right, like your heart grows to accommodate it. Like it is not necessarily ever going to get smaller, but your heart might get bigger to fit
Mm.
other things into. And there are other ways of talking about it, but I like that one,
Yeah.
even if it is like Hallmark card schmaltzy.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I guess we can get into some force lore for this one then.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I like how this one, th- at the very end of Empire Strikes Back, the Rebel fleet is seen what flying some distance away from what looks
The
like
Empire
a.
Strikes Back.
Did I say Empire Strikes Back?
I
Did I
feel
say
like you
something
said
else?
Rebel Strikes Back, but
Oh,
I don't know
the
because it took me
Empire
a while,
Strikes
and I was
Back.
like, wait.
Yeah. So at the end of the movie, the Empire Strikes Back, the Rebel fleet is orbiting what looks like a galaxy, and for a long time, Star Wars fans have been like, hyperspace lanes do not have the ability to take one out of the galaxy. We learn something different about that in Ahsoka. Very minor spoilers, but like this can't be the galaxy. So what is this? And so I like how this this version of the story says, "Oh, it's a protostar. So that's what's happening. It's not a galaxy. It just looks like one. It's a
Mm-hmm.
protostar." So it kind of solves that kind of um, internal inconsistency about the Star Wars
Mm-hmm.
universe. Um, the other thing that just makes me uncomfortable here is that um, when 2-1B is working on Luke, Leia comes in, and 2-1B notices that Luke and Leia very deeply care for each other. And 2-1B notices, oh, but the last time I saw them together was on Hoth when I was working on Luke. And when he came out of the tank then and saw Leia came in, he was showing signs of being physically attracted to her. But now that he's seeing her, he's seeing signs of still loving her, but without the physical attraction. And so I'm like, why did you include that? Because it just makes me uncomfortable, because it's kind of confirming that at the beginning of Empire, Luke and Leia did have the hots for each other. At least Luke did. And it grosses me out.
Well,
Sorry.
and like at that point though, so I think there is definitely a space of like comp heading and Allo's programming the droid to make it hard for the droid to like understand the different types of love that exist.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and also, I the droid like Luke and Leia don't know that they're related at
Yes.
all. And I think
Yes.
there is a space in there that when they don't know and they're still trying to navigate things, and there is another person who is definitely attracted to Leia.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just like there's so much of like masculinity trained into Luke that it's easy for him to like, I have a deep connection and care deeply for this
Yes.
person that I just met, and so I am and she's attractive, and so I am physically attracted to her and I love her. And no, this isn't jealousy about Han at all. Like maybe he
Yeah.
actually loves Han and he doesn't know how to admit that.
That's real. I
And so
like
then it
that.
like,
I like that read. And I want to be I feel like I'm gonna get into muddy waters no matter how I say this. Um, Incest is a cultural taboo in this in much of Western society and is not universally different aspects of incestual relationships are not universally seen as taboo around the world. Brother and sister incestuousness is typically taboo around the world, but not to the extent it is in Western culture and stuff. So I recognize I'm speaking out of a place of I've been trained in a place where this is really taboo and cringe for me, so I'm speaking from that. And also so there's that piece of it, but also I want to say I love your reading of this and Luke secretly being in love with Han because our beloved Star Wars saint Mark Hamill, who played Luke Skywalker, has said several times that he thinks Luke Skywalker being gay is absolutely correct and appropriate reading for the character. And so I totally am on board with that.
Yes, you heard it here, folks. Luke Skywalker. You didn't hear it here first, because technically Mark Hamill said it, but
Yeah.
we'll pretend like you heard it here first, folks.
Yay. Luke is gay for Han. It makes so much
Mm-hmm.
sense.
It really does. Like, I just thought of it like as we were as I literally as I was talking. Um but it makes so much sense. Like, there's
Mm-hmm.
so much of the companionship and bond, and yeah, I'm here for it. Mm-hmm.
Sweet. Well then, ready for a last story?
The Wills Strike Back by Tom
Yay.
Engelberger.
So, Tom Engelberger is a children's author who wrote a lot of Star Wars children's books, including the Origami Yoda series, The Surprise Attack of Jabba the Puppet, as well as the
Jabba
YA
the what?
Jabba the Puppet.
Okay, I think something happened with your mic, and it was like I
Oh,
couldn't hear it.
Jabba the Puppet, as well as the YA canon novelization of Return of the Jedi, Beware the Power of the Dark Side, and the Chewbacca middle grade chapter book, The Mighty Chewbacca and the Forest of Fear, which is such a great book, by the way.
I didn't know Chewbacca had stories.
I mean, you would have when we recorded this because this is the exact same bio for the last time, but that's okay.
Details, I forgot.
It's okay. Um, so what is your one sentence summary, or should I? I did it last. Your turn. What's your one sentence summary?
I did it last. I did
Oh,
it first.
okay, fine. Then I'll go. The Wills argue their way into an opening scrawl.
Editors can be the worst.
Don't take a shot. Slash take a shot. Emily's is shorter.
So why did we pick this, Pace?
Because we did the Will story for the first one.
It's the Wills. Tradition. Only the people on video can see my terrible dancing.
Your reenactment of Fiddler on the Roof.
Uh-huh.
I love it.
I was getting a little confused because I could see myself in the mirror, and I was... Yeah.
So,
Fun fact, I went to high school with a kid who was in Fiddler on the Roof on Broadway in 2016.
oh, very cool.
Mm-hmm. I got to go behind the scenes, and I touched a piece of the set. Because I had to knock on wood because I said something that I was questioning superstitions.
Ooh, what did you say? Did you say the GL or something around that, or a different superstition?
I don't remember what I said, but we were unsure if it was.
No.
And so I just, to be safe.
Fair. Well, the Wills in the Star Wars universe are now canon. For a while, they weren't officially canon, but they are now. And they are some sort of long-lived slash immortal beings that are chronicling the events of the Star Wars universe. So all of our books, movies, TV shows, everything Star Wars related is based on the Journal of the Wills, which tells the story of the Star Wars universe. And so that's basically the um what is the word I'm looking for? There's a literary term for basically when a framing narrative. That's the word I'm looking for. The framing narrative of Star Wars is that it is from a book, kind of like how Lord of the Rings is supposedly
I was
from the
just
book of
wondering that.
Bilbo
Yeah. Yeah.
that Bilbo wrote. So,
And then
any
that Frodo wrote.
yes, that
The Lord of
Frodo
the Hobbit.
continued to write, and then Sam continued to write, and then somehow,
Supposedly.
yeah.
We haven't
Uh,
seen anything of Sam, so I don't think.
but so the theology of this, this is really just a joke story, and I love it. So there's not much theology here other than the reliability of narrators in general. How reliable are narrators? That's
Mm-hmm.
something that everybody should always, always have in mind when reading book is how reliable is the narrator.
In fiction and nonfiction.
And this includes the Bible, friends. How
Mm-hmm.
reliable are the narrators who are telling the story of Jesus? How reliable are the narrators who are telling the wars in Canaan during the Exodus and Numbers and the Pentateuch and Joshua, especially, and stuff? So it's like,
Yeah.
check yourself.
Unreliable narrator is definitely a trope. Also, the Witch Please podcast talked about it a lot with um, a certain series written by a certain turf.
Hmm, hmm.
That the narrator is just like completely unreliable.
So, but what I love about this is that it is kind of making plain what is behind the scenes and turning it into a joke. But it's like done in a way that is like breaking the fourth wall and making a lot of jokes that the fans would get,
Mm-hmm.
especially about the internal inconsistencies and stuff. So definitely, if you only get the from a certain point of views for the Will stories, they're worth it just from that because they're so funny. But honestly, all the stories are really good, so you should get it
Yeah.
for more than just that. But the Will stories are really funny. Um,
I also really like that just the like grammatical piece of it of like, oh, you're doing it in the present tense. That's passive voice. What?
yeah,
How? Then it's just like, yep, this is what happens when it's like, who actually wrote these?
yep.
Because they were not English teachers.
I love. Yeah, I love that it makes fun of the fact that the opening scroll of Empire Strikes Back says that the Rebel fleet is under the command of Luke Skywalker, and that is not at all the case in the movie. So it's always been like, why the fuck? And so I love that they make a joke about that. I love that they make a joke about how this story having an unambiguous, unhappy ending wouldn't be liked by everyone, and saying that knowingly because Empire Strikes Back is widely considered to be the best of the original trilogy. Not universally, but why many people say that it's the best.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just really funny.
Yeah, I really like it. It's a fun one.
And then also Forslur, what gets left out? Again, another reference to Life Day, which now Emily knows what that's about and the reasons why it was left out and should have been left out.
Yeah. Yeah, I do like when they're like, "Well, what about this? Well, what about this?" And then in the first one, especially, but also in this one, it's like, yeah, you're naming the things that like got left out. But why did they get left out? Not just like Life Day. We all know why that got left out, but um, the other
yeah.
ones too.
Yeah. Well, I guess we can rate this then.
Mm-hmm.
I will rate this an 8.5 kyber crystals. So 8 kyber crystals and one half of one that is faltering and
But not about to like bleed into the dark.
yeah, not about to bleed into the dark. It's just cracked, so it needs some healing power. It needs Ahsoka to come and turn it white because white is pure according to Star Wars. Thanks for that.
Wow, they really, really dive into that racist tropes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Um, what about you?
there are non-binary characters and authors in this,
Right.
and queer stories, and like it feels like there are more. I don't know that there were non-binary characters in the first one.
I don't remember,
There
but
were
yeah.
some queer stories, but there's like multiples in this one, so I really appreciated that. I don't remember what I gave the other one, and I don't want anybody
You
to
gave
tell
it.
me
Oh, then I won't tell you.
until until at least after I have rated this one. Because I'm trying to like rate them independently, and then later when we give them, if we like
We'll
do
do
a
a
quiz or whatever.
retrospective and all
Yeah.
that.
I think I'm gonna give it a 9.
Nice.
Yeah.
I like it. So you did in fact rate it higher than the first one.
Oh, what did I rate the first one?
8.5.
I
And I
was like wondering because I was like, I don't know if it's better or not. I mean, the first one I had the audiobook, and this one I didn't have the audiobook for, and
so
so
that
there's just
yeah.
like that's just hard because the audiobooks are really good. But yeah,
And I rated the first one an 8. So both of us rated this one 0.5 kyber crystals better than the first.
nice. And do you have a favorite kill?
Um Yeah, my favorite kill is Luke's ego in the in the final story.
I think where did I have to find it?
I like how our Patreon supporters are seeing all the behind the scenes pauses as we look stuff up. And how I just like will randomly chew on stuff because I'm ADHD and
Do you just post like the
autistic.
whole uncut?
I don't have time to edit video. I have barely enough time to edit audio.
That's
Can you
true. When I get
imagine?
into editing video for like my TikToks, it's ridiculous. Yeah. Okay, it's the one that was Oh, no, I guess I like that one. Okay. There are a couple that I could choose from. But I think in the final order by Seth Dickinson,
Mm.
I would give Captain Cannon House a favorite, but I was trying to find the one that we get the perspective of the person that's being force choked.
Oh yeah.
And I kind of really like that one because there's a like, oh shit, what did I do moment. And a like, is this like love for somebody else, or is this just like you lost who you are inside?
Yeah.
That's the one I was trying to find and I couldn't find it. So if you, dear listeners and watchers, know which one I am trying to find, let me know because I forgot to look it up beforehand, obviously.
No problem. No problems.
But yeah, I really love this one. Mm-hmm.
Yay. Our Star Wars season beginning sometime, probably the end of January, with A New Hope and also Alien. And then at some point, we will get to Return of the Jedi from a certain point of view. We need to give Emily a chance to read it because they're just starting tonight, as you heard. So,
Yes.
And they wanted to wait till after we recorded this, which absolutely makes
true.
sense.
I was gonna like once we got our notes in, I was gonna start reading it, but then I had back stuff and other things that were like, and I'm not doing anything. So yeah, but thanks for tuning in, folks, and that's it for our show. Our theme music was by Matt May. Horror Nerds at Church releases on Thursdays sporadically. Please comment, rate, and subscribe to us wherever you catch your podcasts. Support us on Patreon and get access to the video of this episode. Support us on Patreon and get access to the uncut video of this episode and exclusive movie commentary episodes, BooTube episodes, and more bonus content by going to patreon.com/horror nerds at church. Plus, you can get really awesome Zoom screen backgrounds and help me summon the snow to Baltimore. It starts at only $5 to sign up, though technically you can get the Zoom backgrounds for freezy. And that is definitely cheaper than buying any droids to work on the Millennium Falcon and join their collective. Follow us on social media, Facebook and Instagram at Horror Nerds at Church, and Twitter and Blue Sky at HNACPOD for all the latest updates about upcoming films, news, and other announcements. Until next time, may the Force be with you. Oh, don't forget your tips and tricks so that, oh crap, I had it. Don't forget to keep track of Amara Kell's rules for the Thai pilot survival.
Yes.
Stay safe, stay alive.
Yay. Take your meds.
Yes. Drink your water.
Bye.
All the things.